What if I told you that the rosary hanging on your wall right now might be the source of the unexplained tension in your home? This isn't superstition or fear-mongering. This comes directly from St. Padre Pio, who could see what most of us cannot. Last week, a woman wrote to me describing how her family was falling apart. Constant arguments, financial problems, even health issues that doctors couldn't explain. After viewing one of our videos, she examined the antique rosary hanging in her bedroom, a black one she'd purchased at an estate sale. Within days of removing it, the atmosphere in her home transformed completely. Padre Pio, the stigmatic saint with extraordinary spiritual gifts, left us a warning that few have heeded. Certain rosaries, particularly in 3 specific colors, can act as spiritual conduits for negative influences rather than divine protection. And what's truly alarming, these are often the most beautiful, most unique rosaries that catch our eye in shops or online stores. Today, I'm going to reveal exactly which colors Padre Pio warned against, why these seemingly innocent prayer deeds might be affecting your home, and the 6 warning signs that a rosary might be spiritually compromised. The third type I'll mention is particularly concerning. It's become increasingly common in Catholic homes despite its hidden dangers. Are you ready to discover what might be hiding in plain sight in your prayer corner? Because after hearing this teaching from Padre Pio, you'll never look at rosaries the same way again. If you believe in the spiritual wisdom of Padre Pio, write in the comments, "Discern my path, Padre Pio." Your comment could help someone whose home is being affected without them realizing it. Now let me take you deeper into understanding the true power of the rosary and why this very power makes it a target for spiritual distortion. The rosary isn't merely a string of beads. It's a profound spiritual weapon. When used with sincere devotion, it creates a powerful chain of prayer, connecting us directly to the Blessed Virgin Mary and through her to Christ himself. Since its revelation to St. Dominic in the 13th century, the rosary has been associated with countless spiritual victories, conversions, and miracles. But this spiritual power is precisely what makes the rosary susceptible to misuse. Throughout history, sacred objects have been targets for distortion and profanation. As Padre Pio often reminded his spiritual children, the devil is like a rabid dog tied to a chain. Beyond the length of the chain, he cannot catch hold of anyone, and you keep at a distance. Padre Pio possessed extraordinary spiritual gifts. He could read souls, bilocate, and most relevantly to our discussion today, he could sense when an object carried spiritual influences. Many visitors to San Giovanni Rotondo were surprised when Padre Pio would refuse to bless certain items they brought, sometimes even requesting they be destroyed. One woman from Naples once approached him with what appeared to be an ordinary rosary. Before she could speak, Padre Pio recoiled and said, "Take that thing away from here. It has not been created for prayer, but for something else entirely." Later investigation revealed the rosary had been used in occult rituals before being disguised as a Catholic sacramental. This gift of discernment allowed Padre Pio to teach us a crucial spiritual principle. Not everything that appears holy is truly sacred. In our modern world, where religious items are mass-produced and sold as fashion accessories or decorative pieces, this warning becomes even more significant. Many Catholics today collect rosaries of different colors and designs without considering their spiritual implications. But we must remember that sacramentals are not mere accessories. They are extensions of our faith and channels of grace when properly blessed and respected. Now let me share something important with you. If you're seeking to deepen your spiritual connection with Padre Pio and strengthen your faith, I've created a special resource for you. Our ebook, The Spiritual Secrets of St. Padre Pio, contains powerful prayers, reflections based on his teachings, and practical advice to strengthen your spirituality. You'll find the link pinned in the comments if you wish to discover how this content can transform your spiritual journey. But returning to our topic, what exactly makes certain colored rosaries potentially dangerous? Let's explore the 3 specific types that Padre Pio warned against keeping in your home, and why their presence might be affecting your family's spiritual well-being in ways you haven't realized. According to the wisdom passed down from Padre Pio, there are 3 specific types of rosaries that deserve particular caution. Each carries potential spiritual risks that may not be immediately apparent to those who possess them. The first type that Padre Pio warned against is the completely black rosary. While black can symbolize mourning and penitence in Catholic tradition, this color has also been appropriated for various esoteric and occult practices. The trio noticed that many black rosaries, especially those not acquired from trusted religious sources, had been previously used in rituals contrary to the Christian faith. There's a profound story from one of Padre Peo's spiritual directors about a woman who struggled with inexplicable nightmares and a growing sense of despair. Despite regular prayer and confession, her spiritual distress continued to worsen. When she finally visited San Giovanni Ortando, Tadrio immediately asked about the dark object she kept by her bedside. It was a black rosary she had found in an antique shop, attracted by its ornate silver crucifix. Padre Teo instructed her to dispose of it, explaining that this rosary had been consecrated for purposes far removed from Christian devotion. Within days of following his advice, her spiritual trouble subsided. The spiritual sensitivity that allowed Padre Teo to detect these influences wasn't merely intuition. It was a profound gift of discernment that many witnesses confirmed. He could often sense the history of an object, particularly those used in spiritual contests, whether for good or ill. This gift allowed him to identify black rosaries that had been used in ceremonies invoking powers opposed to Christian faith. Even when these objects appeared perfectly ordinary to others, what made black rosaries particularly concerning to Padre Pio wasn't the color itself, but how this color had been adopted by certain groups specifically because it absorbed and concealed spiritual energies. He explained that black objects, when used in negative spiritual practices, could become repositories for influences that remain active long after the initial rituals concluded. These influences, while invisible to ordinary perception, created what he described as spiritual interference that disrupted prayer and peace. The second concerning category is the blood red rosary. While red traditionally represents the blood of Christ and the martyrs in Catholic symbolism, certain intensely red rosaries had associations with blood rituals and practices that distort the sacred meaning. Padre Pio could distinguish between appropriate red rosaries and those carrying troubling spiritual influences. Padre Pio explained that the color itself wasn't inherently problematic. It was the intention behind the object's creation and previous use that mattered. Some red rosaries were specifically crafted for rituals involving blood pacts or invocations outside the Christian tradition. These objects, even when later blessed, could retain spiritual residues that interfere with peaceful prayer. During his lifetime, Padre Teo encountered numerous cases of devotees who experienced spiritual difficulties connected to blood red rosaries acquired from uncertain sources. One particularly notable case involved a family experiencing unusual discord after receiving an antique red rosary as a gift. The father, previously gentle and patient, began suffering from uncharacteristic anger. Their teenage son developed severe insomnia, while their youngest child became fearful of entering certain rooms of the house. When they consulted Padre Pio, he immediately inquired about the red chain hanging in your prayer room. The mother was shocked. They had indeed hung an ornate red rosary as a decorative element in their home altar. Padre Pio explained that this particular rosary had been used in rituals, mixing Catholic prayers with invocations to other entities, creating a spiritual confusion that was affecting their home environment. After removing it and having their home blessed, the family reported that peace returned to their relationships and home. The third category, perhaps the most concerning in today's context, involves multicolored rosaries made from unconventional materials that mimic amulets or talismans from non-Christian traditions. These include rosaries with beads resembling eyes, unusual symbols embedded within the crucifix, or those incorporating elements from multiple spiritual traditions. These hybrid rosaries represent what Padre Pio called spiritual confusion, objects that blend authentic Catholic devotion with elements from incompatible spiritual practices. In our age of spiritual eclecticism and mass production, these rosaries have become increasingly common, often marketed as inclusive spirituality or universal prayer beads. This third category presents particular challenges because it often appears benign or even positively ecumenical to the untrained eye. Padre Pio warned that these syncretic rosaries were especially troubling because they created confusion about the nature of prayer itself. Prayer in the Christian tradition is directed toward God through specific channels of grace. When prayer tools incorporate elements from multiple spiritual systems with fundamentally different understandings of the divine, They can create what Padre Pio described as spiritual static interference in the clear channel of communication with God. Modern spiritual marketplaces, both online and in physical locations, have made these hybrid prayer beads increasingly available. Some incorporate crystals claim to have specific energetic properties. Symbols from various world religions are elements like evil eyes meant to ward off negative influences. While often marketed as spiritually inclusive, these objects reflect what Padre Pio described as a spiritual compromise that ultimately diminishes authentic connection with God. A particularly troubling trend Padre Pio might recognize in our modern context is the commercialization of rosaries as fashion accessories or decorative items divorced from their spiritual purpose. When sacred objects become primarily aesthetic or trendy items, they risk losing their spiritual integrity. This doesn't necessarily make them spiritually dangerous in the same way as objects used in contrary practices, but it represents a different kind of spiritual confusion, one that trivializes sacred things. How can you identify potentially problematic rosaries? Padre Pio offered several indicators. First, pay attention to their origin. Rosaries from unknown sources, especially those found in secondhand shops, flea markets, or gifted by individuals with unclear spiritual affiliations, deserve particular scrutiny. Second, notice your inner response when praying with them. Authentic sacramentals typically bring peace and focus to prayer. If you experience unusual distraction, anxiety, or spiritual dryness, specifically when using a particular rosary, this might be a sign of spiritual interference. Third, be wary of unusual symbols, inscriptions, or modifications to the traditional design, particularly if they incorporate elements from non-Christian traditions or seemingly arbitrary symbols. Fourth, consider the physical materials. While rosaries can be made from various substances, those incorporating materials associated with occult practices, certain crystals, bones, or unusual metals should be approached with caution. Fifth, be mindful of intuitive reactions. Padre Pio believed that God often speaks through subtle interior promptings. If you feel an inexplicable unease about a particular rosary, this discomfort might be worth heeding, even if you can't immediately identify its cause. 6. Consider the effect on your prayer life. The true purpose of a rosary is to facilitate prayer and meditation on the mysteries of Christ's life. If a particular rosary seems to consistently distract rather than focus your attention, or if you find yourself avoiding prayer when using it, this might indicate an incompatibility with its intended spiritual purpose. It's important to note that Padre Pio's cautions about these specific rosaries weren't meant to create fear or superstition. Rather, they reflected his deep understanding that spiritual realities, when invisible, have real effects on our lives and prayers. His guidance invited Catholics to approach sacramentals with informed reverence rather than casual indifference. Padre Pio also emphasized that no object, regardless of its history, has power greater than God's grace. Even rosaries with troubling histories can be properly reconsecrated through the Church's blessing, though in some cases he recommended replacing them entirely as a matter of spiritual prudence. As we move forward, let's examine how these objects might be affecting your home environment and family relationships in ways you may not have connected to their presence. The presence of spiritually compromised rosaries in your home can manifest in surprising ways that many fail to recognize. Padre Pio, with his profound spiritual insight, observed patterns of spiritual and domestic disturbance connected to these objects. The first sign often appears in your prayer life. Many devoted Catholics report a mysterious resistance to prayer, despite their sincere intention. A man from Sicily described it as trying to swim upstream whenever he attempted to establish a regular prayer routine. After consulting with Padre Pio, he discovered that an antique rosary displayed prominently in his home, a family heirloom with an unusual combination of black and red beads, was creating what Padre Pio called a spiritual static. Once removed, his prayer life flowed naturally again. Beyond prayer difficulties, problematic rosaries can affect the atmosphere of your home. Unexplained tension, recurring arguments over trivial matters, and a persistent feeling of heaviness are common symptoms. What makes these signs particularly troubling is how ordinary they seem, often mistaken for normal family stress or personal challenges rather than spiritual interference. Sleep disturbances represent another frequently reported effect. Nightmares, insomnia, or however, feeling unusually drained upon waking, especially when these symptoms affect multiple family members simultaneously, might indicate spiritual influence. Padre Pio explained that during sleep, our conscious defenses are lowered, making us more susceptible to the subtle influences of spiritually compromised objects. Children and pets, with their natural spiritual sensitivity, often react first to these influences. Behavioral changes, unexplained fears, or a child's sudden reluctance to enter certain rooms where these objects are kept can be telling indicators that something in the environment is creating spiritual discomfort. What's particularly striking in Padre Pio's teaching is how these effects accumulate gradually. The spiritual destruction rarely announces itself dramatically. Instead, it builds slowly, eroding peace and harmony incrementally until the home environment feels fundamentally altered. Martha, a devoted parishioner who regularly corresponded with Padre Pio, shared a powerful testimony. For nearly 2 years, her previously harmonious household experienced escalating conflict and emotional distance. Financial problems emerged without clear cause, and family members began suffering from chronic exhaustion and irritability. What began as occasional disagreements evolved into a pattern of constant tension that threatened their family unity. Seeking guidance, she wrote to Padre Pio, who asked a surprising question: had she recently acquired any new religious items? Martha remembered a collection of rosaries she had purchased at an estate sale. Beautiful pieces in unusual colors that she'd placed throughout her home as reminders to pray. Padre Pio instructed her to remove them and have new, properly blessed rosaries from a reputable religious source. The transformation in her household was remarkable. Within weeks, the atmosphere lightened. Relationships began healing, and even her financial situation gradually improved. Padre Pio explained that spiritually compromised objects don't create problems from nothing. Rather, they amplify existing weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Like a magnifying glass focusing sunlight, they intensify natural human failings into persistent patterns of discord. This explains why their effects can be so difficult to identify. The resulting problems seem like natural extensions of ordinary human weakness rather than external spiritual influence. Understanding these signs is the first step toward discernment. But how should you proceed if you suspect a rosary in your possession might be carrying negative spiritual influences? What practical steps did Padre Pio recommend for restoring spiritual protection to your home? Let's explore his guidance for addressing these concerns with both faith and prudence. Pio provided clear, practical guidance for those who discovered potentially problematic rosaries in their homes. His approach balanced spiritual discernment with practical action, emphasizing that addressing these concerns required both faith and prudence. The first step he recommended was a thorough inventory of religious items in your home. This isn't about paranoia or seeing problems where none exist, but rather bringing mindful awareness to objects we often take for granted. Examine each rosary, noting its origin, materials, and unusual features that deviate from traditional designs. Ask yourself, where did this come from? Who made it? What was their intention? If you discover rosaries of the three concerning types, black, blood red, or unusual multicolored ones with non-traditional elements, Padre Pio offered specific protocols for handling them. Importantly, he cautioned against simply throwing them away, as this doesn't address their spiritual nature. For rosaries with unclear origins, but obviously troubling features, Padre Pio recommended a simple blessing by a priest. Most parish priests are familiar with blessing religious items and can do this after Mass or during scheduled office hours. This blessing reconsecrates the object for its proper sacred purpose, nullifying any previous misuse or negative associations. However, for rosaries that trigger genuine spiritual discomfort or possess clearly problematic elements, Padre Pio advised a different approach. These should be taken to a priest experienced in spiritual matters who can determine whether the item should be blessed or nor, in some cases, properly disposed of through specific prayers and protocols. The proper way to dispose of blessed items that cannot be repurposed, Padre explained, is to return them to the elements. This typically means burning or burying them after prayers have been said. This should be done with reverence, acknowledging that even compromised religious objects deserve respectful treatment. Prevention is equally important. When acquiring new rosaries, Padre Pio emphasized 3 criteria: proper source, proper blessing, and proper intention. Purchase rosaries only from reputable religious suppliers, church gift shops, established Catholic bookstores, or directly from religious communities. Have them blessed before use and approach them with reverence rather than as decorative or fashion accessories. Padre Pio particularly recommended traditional rosaries made of simple materials, wood, glass, or basic metals crafted by religious communities as part of their contemplative work. These rosaries, he noted, carry the added blessing of being created in an environment of prayer. For those who'd experienced negative spiritual influences, Padre Pio suggested a comprehensive approach to restoring spiritual health to the home. This included having the house blessed by a priest, establishing a dedicated prayer space with properly blessed religious items, and maintaining regular family prayer, particularly the rosary itself, when used as intended. One practical recommendation that Padre Pio often gave was creating what he called a spiritual shield for the home. This involved placing properly blessed sacramentals, a crucifix, holy water, and a simple traditional rosary near entryways and in bedrooms. These items, when blessed and used with sincere devotion, create a protective spiritual atmosphere. In all these recommendations, Padre Pio emphasized an important principle. The power lies not in the objects themselves, but in the faith, intention, and divine blessing they carry. A simple wooden rosary, properly blessed and used with sincere devotion, carries far more spiritual power than the most ornate or expensive rosary approached as a talisman or accessory. As we conclude our exploration of this little-known teaching from Padre Pio, let's integrate these insights into a comprehensive understanding of spiritual protection for our homes and families. As we've journeyed through these warnings from Padre Pio about the spiritual significance of rosaries, let's remember his greatest teaching. True protection comes not from objects themselves, but from sincere faith and devotion to God. The rosary, when used properly, is a powerful tool for prayer, but its power flows from the intentions of the heart, not from the deeds themselves. Padre Pio wanted us to understand that discernment in our spiritual lives extends to everything we bring into our homes. The black rosaries, blood red beads, and unconventional multicolored prayer beads he warned against are significant not because of any inherent evil in colors or materials, but because of how they might have been used from the intentions with which they were created. Our spiritual journeys require both faith and vigilance. Pray, hope, and don't worry, Padre Pio famously said. But he also taught that prayer should be accompanied by prudent action. Examining the rosaries in your home, ensuring they come from trustworthy sources, and having them properly blessed are simple acts of spiritual vigilance that honor his teachings. Remember that true purpose of any sacramental, including the rosary, is to draw us closer to Christ through prayer and devotion. When we maintain this proper perspective, the rosary becomes what it was always meant to be, the lifeline of prayer connecting us to heaven. If the warnings in this video have resonated with your spirit, I invite you to write spiritual protection in the comments below. Your comment will help others discover this important message who may be facing unexplained spiritual challenges in their homes. And if you found value in these teachings of Padre Pio, please consider supporting our channel's mission to spread these vital spiritual insights. Each like, share, and subscription helps us reach more souls seeking spiritual guidance in these challenging times. Your support is essential for our mission to spread Padre Pio's teachings. If this video has touched your heart, please like it, share it with your loved ones, and consider becoming a channel member. Together, we form a spiritual community. And with your help, we can bring these words of faith and hope to more people who need them. May Padre Pio's blessing be upon you and your home, bringing discernment, protection, and peace to your spiritual journey. Remember his words, the rosary is the weapon for these times. But like any weapon, it must be used wisely and with proper understanding. Thank you for joining us today on this spiritual journey of discovery. And until next time, keep faith in your heart and wisdom in your spiritual practices.